The package arrived on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. I knew it was from Ethan before I even checked the return address, that familiar handwriting on the label, the same careful loops he'd practiced since third grade, when Martha taught him cursive at the kitchen table. The box sat on my porch like a question I wasn't ready to answer. I'd been standing at the kitchen window, watching the late afternoon light turn the snow blue when the FedEx truck pulled away. The house was quiet in that particular way it gets when you've lived alone long enough that silence becomes a companion rather than an absence. Martha's been gone 3 years now, but I still catch myself setting 2 coffee cups on the counter some mornings, still expect to hear her humming those old hymns while she wraps presents in the dining room. The box wasn't large, maybe the size of a shoebox wrapped in plain brown paper professionally done. No personal touches, no handwritten card tucked under the tape. Just my name and address in black marker and Ethan's California return address stamped in the corner. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table, the same table where Martha and I had shared 42 Christmas dinners, where we'd taught Ethan to tie his shoes, where we'd signed the mortgage papers for this house back in 1981. I made coffee before opening it, not because I needed the caffeine, but because some rituals steady you when the ground feels uncertain beneath your feet. The percolator bubbled and hissed, filling the kitchen with that rich, dark smell that always reminded me of winter mornings, of Martha laughing as she burned the first batch of Christmas cookies, of Ethan running down the stairs in his footy pajamas to see if Santa had come yet. Through the window above the sink, I could see the garage where I'd taught my son to change oil, to use a level, to measure twice and cut once. The workbench was still there, tools hanging in the same places they had hung for decades. Ethan used to stand on an overturned bucket to reach the higher tools, his small hands serious as he handed me the right wrench, eager to help, eager to learn. That was before Madison, before her parents Gerald and Patricia with their country club memberships, and their thinly veiled contempt for a man who'd spent his life working with his hands. Before Ethan started looking at this house, the house Martha and I built together like it was just another asset to be managed. I poured the coffee into Martha's favorite mug, the blue ceramic one with the tiny chip on the handle that she'd refused to throw away. It gives it character, she'd always said, running her thumb over the imperfection the way she did with everything broken that still had use left in it. The steam rose in gentle curls, and I thought about last Christmas when Ethan had called exactly once at 9 a.m. sharp, like he was checking something off a list. Madison had been audible in the background. "Tell him we can't make it this year. My parents need us." Her parents, who lived in a mansion in Montclair with a full-time housekeeper and a wine cellar that cost more than I'd made in 5 years of construction work, who needed their daughter and son-in-law for Christmas because being alone might force them to acknowledge that money can't buy the one thing they'd never managed to acquire: genuine human warmth. I took a long sip of coffee and reached for the box. The tape came away easily, too easily, as if someone had opened it before, then resealed it with care that bordered on surgical precision. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a bottle of whiskey. Not just any whiskey, but a limited edition from a distillery in Kentucky that Martha and I had visited on our 30th anniversary. The label was elegant, the bottle heavy with that substantial weight that speaks of craftsmanship and expense. For a moment, my throat tightened. A memory Martha and I in that distillery's tasting room, the guide explaining the aging process, the copper stills gleaming in the afternoon light. Martha had bought me a bottle, then insisted on splurging, even though money was tight that year. We'd saved it for our 40th anniversary planning, to sit on the porch swing and watch the sunset while we shared a glass. We never got the chance. The cancer took her 6 months before that anniversary took her fast, and mean, leaving me alone in this house full of ghosts and memories. But this wasn't that bottle. This was something else, something newer. Something that felt wrong in ways I couldn't quite articulate. I turned it over in my hands, examining it the way I used to examine lumber for hidden flaws. The seal was intact, the label pristine. Inside, something shifted with a sound that wasn't quite right. Not the smooth slosh of liquid, but something else, something that caught and settled differently. There was a card tucked beneath the bottle. Heavy cardstock, expensive. The message was brief. "Dad thinking of you this Christmas. Enjoy this the way Mom would have wanted." Ethan, the way Mom would have wanted. The words sat there like a splinter I couldn't quite dig out. Martha would have wanted us together for Christmas. She would have wanted Ethan to visit, to sit in this kitchen and drink coffee while we caught up on each other's lives. She would have wanted to see her son's face, not just his handwriting on an expensive card, accompanying an expensive gift that felt like a transaction rather than a gesture. I set the bottle on the counter and walked to the living room where the Christmas tree should have been. Martha always insisted on a real tree, said the smell was half the magic. She'd start decorating the day after Thanksgiving, humming carols, while she carefully unwrapped each ornament from its tissue paper nest. There was no tree this year, just the empty corner where it should have stood and the box of ornaments in the attic gathering dust. The afternoon light was fading now, turning everything in the house to shades of gray and gold. I stood in front of the mantel where our wedding photo still sat in its silver frame. Martha in her grandmother's dress, me in a rented tux that was too tight in the shoulders, both of us young and hopeful and completely unprepared for the beautiful, difficult life we were about to build together. Next to it was a photo of Ethan at 7, missing his 2 front teeth, holding up the bass he'd caught off the dock at our old lake cabin. The cabin we'd sold to help him with his down payment on the house in California, the house where he now lived with Madison and her parents, who'd moved into the guest wing after Gerald's retirement, the wing we'd helped finance. I picked up that photo of Ethan, studied the gap-toothed grin, the pride in his eyes. When had that boy turned into the man who sent expensive whiskey instead of showing up? When had phone calls become obligations, visits become negotiations, love become something measured in dollars and assets? The phone rang, cutting through my thoughts. I knew before I answered who it would be. Dad. Ethan's voice was bright, professionally warm. Did you get the package? I did. Good. It's from that distillery you and Mom visited, remember, the one in Kentucky? I thought you'd appreciate the sentiment. I looked at the bottle on the counter, still catching the last light from the window. It's an expensive sentiment. You deserve it. After everything, he paused and I could hear Madison in the background, her voice too distant to make out the words, but clear in its urgency. Listen, Dad, I wanted to catch you before Christmas. Things are busy here with Madison's family, but we're thinking of you. Thinking of me. Not coming to see me, not inviting me there, just thinking. Will you be able to visit? I asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it anyway. Another pause. Actually, that's partly why I'm calling. Madison's parents really need us here this year. Her father's been having some health issues, nothing serious, but you know how it is. Family obligations. Family obligations. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I was family too once. Before I became the inconvenient father who lived in a small house in a small town, who drove an old truck, who reminded Ethan of a life he was trying to leave behind. I understand, I said, because what else was there to say? But Dad, about that whiskey, you should really enjoy it. Maybe toast to Mom. I think she'd like that. I looked at the bottle again, at the way it sat there on my counter, expensive and hollow. I'll think about it. Great. Well, Merry Christmas, Dad. I'll call you on the day. He would call, exactly at 9 a.m., like clockwork, like an appointment he couldn't reschedule. And that would be my Christmas, a 10-minute phone call and a bottle of expensive whiskey that I couldn't shake. The feeling was wrong somehow. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen as darkness filled the windows. The house creaked and settled around me, those familiar sounds that used to comfort me when Martha was alive. Now they just emphasized the emptiness, the spaces between the sounds where her voice should have been. I picked up the whiskey bottle one more time, held it up to the light. The liquid inside was the right color, moved the right way when I tilted it. But that sound earlier, that catch it, bothered me. Like a nail that wasn't quite flush with the wood, like a board cut 1/8 of an inch too short. You couldn't see the problem, but you could feel it, sense it in the way things didn't quite align. I thought about Martha, about how she'd been able to read Ethan like a book, even when he thought he was being clever. How she'd known when he was lying about that broken window, about the dented fender, about the college fund money he'd borrowed for that failed business venture. She'd always protected him, always found a way to smooth things over to give him another chance. But Martha wasn't here anymore to read between the lines to see what I was just beginning to suspect. I was on my own now, standing in our kitchen with a gift from our son that felt less like love and more like something I couldn't quite name. I put the bottle back on the counter and walked to the window. Outside, the snow was starting to fall again, soft flakes drifting down through the yellow glow of the street lamp. The neighborhood was quiet, windows lit with Christmas trees and holiday decorations. Other families were together sharing meals, opening presents, making memories. And I was here alone with a bottle of expensive whiskey and the growing certainty that something was very, very wrong. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. In 2 days, Ethan would call, Madison would make polite conversation for exactly 2 minutes, and then they'd go back to their lives. And I'd be here still alone, still wondering when my son had stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as what? An obligation, an inconvenience. Something worse, I didn't open the whiskey that night. Instead, I sat in Martha's chair, the one by the window, where she used to knit and watch the snow fall, and I thought about all the Christmases that had come before, the good ones and the hard ones, the ones where money was tight but love was abundant, the ones where we'd fought but made up over eggnog and apologies. This Christmas would be different, not because Martha was gone. I'd learned to carry that grief like a stone in my pocket, heavy but manageable, but because something had shifted, something fundamental in the relationship between a father and his son. And that bottle on my counter with its expensive label and its wrong sound felt less like a gift and more like a message I was only beginning to decode. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white silence. In the morning, I'd have to shovel the driveway salt, the walk go through all the motions of maintaining a house that felt too big for one person. But tonight I just sat and watched the flakes drift past the window, each one unique and temporary here for a moment, before melting away into nothing at all, just like the relationship I'd thought I had with my son. Where are you watching this video from? Leave your location. Christmas Eve morning dawned cold and brittle. I woke in Martha's chair, my neck stiff from sleeping upright, the whiskey bottle still sitting on the counter where I'd left it. The house was silent except for the furnace, clicking on, sending warm air through vents that had carried Martha's baking smells every Christmas morning for 40 years. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the Henderson family across the street load presents into their SUV. 3 generations heading somewhere together, grandparents, parents, kids bundled in bright winter coats. Mrs. Henderson waved when she spotted me, that pitying smile people give widowers during the holidays. I waved back and turned away. The bottle caught the morning light, amber liquid glowing like captured fire. I picked it up again, that nagging feeling stronger now in the daylight. The weight was right, the seal unbroken, but something about the way the liquid moved when I tilted it too thick, maybe, or too slow, like syrup pretending to be water. I'd been a contractor for 43 years. You don't survive that long without developing instincts for things that aren't quite right. A foundation that looks solid but has invisible cracks. Wiring that passes inspection but won't pass time. This bottle had that same quality, a beautiful exterior hiding something fundamentally wrong. The phone sat on the counter next to Martha's recipe box, the one with her handwritten index cards for Christmas cookies, pot roast the apple pie she'd perfected over decades. I picked it up and dialed Robert Carson. He answered on the second ring, probably already up, checking on his own father at the VA home. Frank, Merry Christmas Eve. Same to you, Robert. Listen, I need a favor. Robert had been my crew chief for 15 years before he retired. Solid, dependable, and importantly, he had a son-in-law who worked in the state crime lab. We'd helped each other through enough tough times that favors didn't need lengthy explanations. What kind of favor? The kind where you don't ask questions until after. A pause. That serious? Maybe. Maybe I'm just an old man getting paranoid. But I need something tested and I need it done quiet. The lab's closed for the holiday. After Christmas then. When can your son-in-law do it? Another pause, longer this time. Frank, you're scaring me. I looked at the bottle again, remembering Ethan's voice on the phone. You should really enjoy it. Maybe toast to Mom. The urgency in his tone, like he needed me to drink it, needed confirmation that I'd received it and would consume it. Ethan sent me whiskey for Christmas. That's nice. I haven't touched a drop of alcohol in 3 years. Doctor's orders after the heart attack. Ethan knows that. He was there when the cardiologist gave me the list of things I couldn't have anymore. The silence on Robert's end told me he understood. Jesus, Frank. It's probably nothing. Probably just him forgetting or Madison picking it out without thinking. But you don't believe that? No, I don't. Bring it by after lunch. Carol's family is coming over, so I have an excuse to step out. We'll get it to Mike after Christmas. He owes me. I helped him with his deck last summer. After we hung up, I stood there holding the phone, my reflection ghostly in the window glass. When had I become the kind of father who needed to have his son's gifts tested for poison? When had Ethan become the kind of son who might send such a thing? I thought back to last summer, to the lake house incident. Martha and I had bought that cabin 30 years ago, a modest place on Clear Lake, where we'd spent every summer with Ethan when he was young, swimming, fishing, teaching him to skip stones and identify constellations. After Martha died, I'd kept it visiting occasionally to maintain it to sit on the porch and feel close to her in that place where she'd been happiest. Then Ethan called in June. Madison's parents needed a summer place. Their timeshare in the Hamptons had fallen through. Could they use the cabin for a few weeks? Of course, I'd said. Family should help family. 3 weeks became 6. 6 became the whole summer. When I drove up in September to close it for the winter, I found Gerald and Patricia still there, sipping wine on my porch like they owned it. Ethan and Madison arrived an hour later. "Dad, we need to talk about the cabin," Ethan had said, not even greeting me first. "Gerald and Patricia love it here. They're thinking of retiring to somewhere like this." "It's not for sale," I'd replied, "but you hardly use it." Madison's voice sharp with that edge she got when she wanted something. "It's wasteful keeping it empty most of the year. It's where your mother and I, Mom's gone, Dad." Ethan's words flat and final. "You can't keep living in the past. This place could be put to good use." Gerald had smiled then, that condescending smile of a man used to getting his way. "We'd make you a fair offer, Richard. More than fair, considering the maintenance costs you'd save." I'd left without closing the cabin properly, without draining the pipes or shutting off the water. Let them deal with frozen pipes if they wanted it so badly. When I returned a week later, they were gone, but they'd taken Martha's quilts, the hand-carved duck decoys. I'd made even the photo albums from the shelf. Ethan had been apologetic when I called. "I told them they could take some things. I didn't know you wanted them." "They're your mother's things. We're Dad. We're her things. She's dead. They're just objects now." That was when I'd started to see it, the way Madison and her parents had slowly poisoned my son against everything Martha and I represented. Our simple life, our modest means, our sentimental attachment to things that had no monetary value, but priceless emotional worth. The morning crawled by. I tried to distract myself with small tasks, replacing a washer in the bathroom, faucet, tightening the loose handrail on the basement stairs, organizing the garage workbench. But my eyes kept drifting to that bottle on the counter. At noon, I carefully wrapped it in a towel and placed it in a cardboard box. The bottle felt heavier now, weighted with suspicion and dread. I thought about all the times I'd told Ethan to be careful to measure twice to check his work. He'd been a good student once, attentive and thorough. But Madison had taught him a different kind of lesson, that shortcuts were acceptable if they got you what you wanted, that the ends justified the means. Robert's house was 3 miles away in the newer development, where all the houses looked vaguely similar. Same vinyl siding, same 2-car garages, same landscaped yards. His daughter Carol answered the door, bouncing a baby on her hip. "Uncle Frank Merry Christmas Eve?" She'd called me uncle since she was 6, even though we weren't related. "Dad's in the garage, avoiding my mother-in-law." She laughed, but there was understanding in her eyes. She knew why I was here. Robert was pretending to organize tools the same way I'd been pretending all morning. He looked at the box in my hands and nodded toward his workbench. "Mike will do it," he said. "He'll test for everything, additives, contaminants, anything that shouldn't be there." "I feel ridiculous," I said, like some paranoid old man seeing conspiracies everywhere. "Frank, how much has Ethan visited since Martha passed?" "Twice. Both times he needed something." "How much have you talked to him?" "Phone calls, brief ones, always rushed. And the cabin thing." I didn't answer. We both knew. Robert pulled out 2 beers from the mini fridge in the corner, then remembered and put mine back, getting me a Coke instead. We sat on overturned buckets surrounded by the comfortable smell of sawdust and motor oil. "You know what Martha would say," Robert finally said. "She'd say I was imagining things." "No." Robert shook his head. "She'd say trust your gut. She always did. Remember that contractor who bid so low on the Morrison job? Everyone said take it, but Martha said something wasn't right. Turns out he was cutting corners on materials would have cost you your reputation. This is my son we're talking about." "I know." Robert's voice was gentle. "But he's not the boy who used to help you build birdhouses in your garage. He's a man now with a wife and in-laws who have never hidden what they think of people like us. People who work with our hands, who save for retirement instead of playing the stock market, who think a good Christmas is homemade cookies and a Charlie Brown tree." We sat in silence, watching dust motes dance in the winter sunlight, streaming through the garage door window. Outside, I could hear Carol's kids playing in the snow, their laughter bright and innocent. "The thing that gets me," I said slowly, "is the timing. Why now? Why Christmas?" Robert considered this. "Insurance property. Did Martha leave you well off? The house is paid for. I've got the pension, Social Security, some savings. The life insurance policy. Nothing spectacular, but enough to live comfortably. And who inherits if something happens to you?" The question hung in the cold garage air. Ethan was my only child, my sole beneficiary. The house, the savings, Martha's jewelry, even the cabin I'd refused to sell all of it would go to him and Madison, to Madison's parents who saw everything through the lens of its monetary value. "Mike will have results in a few days," Robert said. "Try to have a decent Christmas until then. Maybe I'm helping you chase shadows." But we both knew better. The shadows were already here, had been gathering for 3 years, maybe longer. I'd just been too grief-stricken, too willing to believe that blood meant something that the boy I'd raised couldn't possibly wish his father harm. I drove home, slowly taking the long way past the old neighborhoods where houses still had lights in every window, where families were gathering for Christmas Eve dinners. At a red light, I watched a young father lift his daughter to hang an ornament on a tree visible through their front window. The girl's face was pure joy, and the father's expression was one of complete love and presence. I'd been that father once. I'd lifted Ethan to put the star on top of our tree, had read him the night before Christmas until I had it memorized, had assembled bikes and train sets long after he'd gone to bed on Christmas Eve. Where had that father gone? Where had that son gone? Back home, the house felt different without the bottle. Emptier, but also clearer, somehow. The late afternoon light slanted through the windows, catching on the dust. I'd neglected the cobwebs in corners Martha would never have allowed. I'd been in stasis since she died, maintaining but not living, existing in this house like a ghost haunting his own life. The phone rang at exactly 5 p.m. Ethan again, right on schedule. "Dad just wanted to make sure you're all set for tomorrow." "I'm fine. Did you open the whiskey yet?" "Have a taste." There it was again, that urgency, that need to know. My hand tightened on the phone. "No, I thought I'd save it, maybe share it with Robert when he visits next week." A pause, just a heartbeat too long. "Oh, well, it's really meant for you. Something special, you know, a Christmas tradition like you and Mom used to have." Martha and I had never had a whiskey tradition. We'd had hot chocolate on Christmas Eve watching It's a Wonderful Life, while the tree lights twinkled. Ethan knew this. He'd sat between us on the couch for 20 Christmases drinking cocoa from his special Santa mug. "I'll think about it," I said. "Madison's parents were asking about you. They said to send their regards." Gerald and Patricia, who'd never spoken a kind word to me in 5 years of knowing them, were sending regards. The same people who'd taken Martha's quilts without asking who'd tried to buy the cabin out from under me, who looked at my calloused hands like they carried disease. "That's nice of them. Dad, about the cabin. I'm not selling it, Ethan. Jesus, I wasn't going to ask. I was just going to say that Gerald knows a property management company that could rent it out for you. Make you some passive income. Passive income from the place where Martha and I had carved our initials into the porch rail, where we'd taught our son to swim, where I still went sometimes to sit in her favorite Adirondack chair and watch the sunset she'd loved." "I'll think about it," I said again, the phrase becoming a shield. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, not bothering to turn on lights. Outside, the street lamps flickered on, and I could see the Henderson family returning kids tumbling out of the SUV with wrapped presents and tired, happy faces. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Merry Christmas Eve, Dad. Enjoy that whiskey. You deserve it. Toast to Mom for us." I stared at the message, at those words, "You deserve it," that could mean so many things. Did I deserve this? This loneliness, this betrayal, this slow realization that the child I'd loved and raised had become someone I no longer recognized. The house creaked around me, settling into night. Somewhere in the attic, Martha's Christmas decorations waited in boxes, the ornaments Ethan had made in grade school, the stockings she'd embroidered with our names, the nativity scene we'd collected piece by piece over the years. Tomorrow was Christmas. Ethan would call at 9 a.m. sharp. He'd ask if I'd tried the whiskey. And I'd have to decide what to say, how to act, whether to pretend I didn't suspect my own son of trying to kill me. I thought about Martha, about what she would do in this situation. She'd always protected Ethan, always seen the best in him. But she'd also taught him right from wrong, had disciplined him when he'd lied or cheated or hurt others. What would she say now if she could see what her baby boy had become? The darkness filled the room completely now, and I sat in it, letting it wash over me like cold water. Somewhere in this town, families were singing carols, opening presents, sharing love and laughter. And somewhere in California, my son was probably toasting his success with his wife and her parents, celebrating a Christmas that didn't include the man who'd given him life. Tomorrow, I'd know more. Robert would get the bottle to Mike, and in a few days I'd have answers. But tonight, on this Christmas Eve, I was just a father, sitting alone in the dark, mourning not a death, but something worse, the slow, deliberate murder of a relationship I'd thought was unbreakable. The clock struck 7, and I finally stood, my joints stiff from sitting still too long. I went to the kitchen and opened Martha's recipe box, pulling out the card for her sugar cookies. The paper was stained and worn, her handwriting faded, but still legible. If this was to be my last Christmas, if that bottle really did contain what I suspected, then I'd spend it doing what Martha would have wanted. I'd bake cookies, I'd watch our favorite movie. I'd remember the good years before everything turned to ash and suspicion. And then, when the truth came out, I'd decide what to do with a son who'd forgotten that love wasn't measured in property values and inheritance checks, but in presence and kindness, in showing up when it mattered most. The flower dust rose in the air as I measured and mixed, and for just a moment, I could almost smell Martha's perfume, almost hear her humming Silent Night as she rolled out dough beside me. Almost, but not quite. Because she was gone, and I was alone, and tomorrow was Christmas, and nothing would ever be the same again. Christmas morning came, with the kind of silence that amplifies every small sound, the furnace humming the refrigerator, cycling my own breathing as I lay in bed watching dawn creep across the ceiling. I'd barely slept, my mind churning through possibilities, each one worse than the last. The sugar cookies sat in a tin on the counter, perfectly golden, exactly as Martha used to make them. I'd stayed up past midnight, finishing them, measuring and mixing with her recipe card propped against the flour canister. But they had brought no comfort, just the hollow ache of doing familiar things in an unfamiliar world where sons sent poisoned gifts to their fathers. At 8:45, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table waiting. The house felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in with their accumulated memories. I could see Martha in every corner, humming at the stove, arranging flowers in her good vase, wrapping presents at this very table with scissors and tape, and that look of concentration, she'd get tongue peeking out between her lips. The phone rang at exactly 9:00 a.m. "Merry Christmas, Dad." Ethan's voice was bright, performative. In the background, I could hear Madison laughing at something crystal, clinking the murmur of conversation. "Merry Christmas. We're just sitting down to breakfast. Madison made mimosas. Her mother brought those croissants from that French bakery she loves. What are you having?" Coffee and suspicion, I wanted to say. Instead, toast. "Oh, Dad." That pitying tone, the same one he'd used when he suggested I move to a retirement community after Martha died. "You should treat yourself on Christmas. Hey, did you try that whiskey toast, Mom, with it?" There was something in his voice, eagerness barely contained, like a child waiting to hear if you'd found the present they'd hidden. My hand tightened around the phone. "Not yet. Thought I'd wait for a special moment." A pause just long enough to be noticeable. "Well, don't wait too long. These things are meant to be enjoyed, not just displayed." "I'll keep that in mind." Madison wants to say hi. Rustling, then her voice smooth as polished stone. "Richard, we hope you're having a lovely day. We're thinking of you. Thinking of me. Not missing me. Not wishing I was there. Just thinking the way you might think of an unfinished task, a bill unpaid." "That's kind of you. Ethan mentioned you haven't tried the whiskey yet. It's really quite special. We went to a lot of trouble to find exactly the right one. We, not he. Madison had been involved in selecting this gift, this bottle that sat even now in Robert's garage, waiting to reveal its secrets. I'm sure it is." After the call ended, I sat with the phone in my hand, Martha's face smiling at me from the frame on the mantel. In the photo she was holding, baby Ethan, her eyes full of such fierce love and protection. What would she think of him now? Would she make excuses, find reasons to justify his actions? Or would she see what I was beginning to see, that the boy we'd raised had been replaced by someone we didn't recognize? The day stretched out empty and endless. I tried to watch the parade on television, but the cheerful announcers and elaborate floats felt like they belonged to a different universe. I ate leftover pot roast for lunch, not tasting it. The house was too quiet, too full of ghosts. At 2:00 p.m., Robert called. Mike took it to the lab, said he'll run it first thing when they reopen on the 27th. Called in a favor with a weekend security guard to get in early. What do I do until then? Stay away from it. Don't drink anything Ethan sends you, and Frank, his voice lowered, start thinking about what you'll do if it comes back positive. After we hung up, I walked through the house like a stranger seeing it with new eyes. The furniture Martha and I had picked out together was Ethan already mentally cataloging its value. The photos on the walls, would they be tossed in a dumpster or sold at an estate sale? This house where we'd built a life, raised a son, grew old together, was it just a property value in his mind? Square footage and market comps? I stopped in front of Ethan's old room. I hadn't changed it much after he moved out his high school trophies, still on the shelf posters of bands he'd loved on the walls, the blue paint we'd chosen together when he was 12. I sat on his bed springs creaking under my weight and remembered tucking him in night after night, reading him stories about dragons and knights and heroes who always did the right thing. Where did I lose you? I asked the empty room. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Hope you're having a good day, Dad. Remember to try that whiskey, think of it as a Christmas toast from Mom wherever she is. Wherever she is. As if Martha was just misplaced somewhere, lost like car keys or reading glasses. Not dead and buried in Oakwood Cemetery, not reduced to ashes in an urn, but just elsewhere. I typed back, "Will do, Merry Christmas." The lie sat bitter on my tongue, but what else could I say? I suspect you're trying to kill me. I'm having your gift tested for poison. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. The afternoon faded into evening. Neighbors' lights came on, warm and golden. Through the windows I could see families moving about, wrapping paper being gathered, dishes being washed, children playing with new toys. Normal Christmas scenes from a normal world I no longer inhabited. At 7:00 p.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Robert was with his family. The neighbors knew I preferred solitude. I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A young woman stood on my porch, stamping her feet against the cold. Dark hair, expensive coat. A face I recognized from photos, Sophia Madison's younger sister. I'd met her once at the wedding, a quiet girl who'd seemed uncomfortable in her family's designer clothes and practiced smiles. I opened the door. "Mr. Dalton." Her breath clouded in the cold air. "I'm sorry to bother you on Christmas, but I need to talk to you. It's about Ethan." I let her in, taking her coat, offering coffee. She declined. We sat in the living room, the Christmas tree corner conspicuously empty between us. "I don't know how to say this," she began, twisting her hands together. "I've been wrestling with it for weeks, but after what I heard this morning," she looked up at me and I saw genuine distress in her eyes. "Did Ethan send you whiskey for Christmas?" My heart began to pound. "Yes." "Did you drink it?" "No." She exhaled a sound of pure relief. "Thank God. Mr. Dalton, I need you to get rid of that bottle. Don't drink it, don't even touch it. There's something—" She stopped, struggling with the words. "There's something wrong with my family, with what they've made Ethan become." I leaned forward. "What do you know, Sophia?" "I heard them talking last week when they thought I was out shopping. My father, my mother, and Ethan. They were talking about insurance policies and property values and how much easier everything would be if you weren't around anymore." The room tilted slightly. Hearing my suspicions confirmed, spoken aloud by someone else, made them terrifyingly real. "Did they specifically mention the whiskey?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Ethan was worried it wouldn't work, that you might not drink it because of your heart. My mother said that's exactly why it would work, that no one would question a heart attack in a man your age with a medical history. They'd tested it on—" She swallowed hard. "They'd tested it on my mother's dog last month, a healthy golden retriever. He had what looked like a heart attack within hours." I sat back, the air gone from my lungs. The dog. I remembered Madison mentioning it in passing on the phone weeks ago. Mom's poor Rusty just dropped dead. The vet said his heart just gave out. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because it's wrong." Her voice broke. "Because you're a good man who doesn't deserve this. Because Ethan used to be different before Madison, before my parents got their hooks into him. They've turned him into something. She wiped her eyes. They've done it to Madison, too. My whole family is poison, Mr. Dalton, and I can't be part of it anymore. Do they know you're here? No, they think I'm at my boyfriend's. They don't approve of him. He's a teacher, doesn't make enough money. But he's decent and kind, and he helped me see how twisted my family has become. I studied her face, looking for deception, for manipulation, but all I saw was a young woman trying to do the right thing at great personal cost. What's in the bottle, Sophia? I don't know exactly. Some kind of extract my father got from someone he knows. It's supposed to mimic a heart attack, leave no trace. But Mr. Dalton? She leaned forward urgently. They're not going to stop. Even if you don't drink this one, they'll find another way. They've already started talking about your stairs being too steep, about you maybe falling, having an accident. The stairs. The same stairs Martha had fallen on 3 years ago. The fall that had led to the diagnosis that killed her within months. The stairs I'd reinforced afterward installed new railings made as safe as I could make them. You need to protect yourself, Sophia continued. Get cameras, change your locks, don't eat or drink anything that comes from them. And you need evidence. Real evidence, not just my word against theirs. The bottle is being tested. Results in a few days. She looked relieved. Good, but that's just one piece. You need more. You need to make them show their hand. How? She thought for a moment. Tell them you're changing your will. Tell them you're leaving everything to Charity or Robert or me, anyone but Ethan. See what they do. That could be dangerous. It's already dangerous, Mr. Dalton. At least this way you're in control. After she left, I sat in the darkness processing everything. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to treat others with kindness and respect, had helped plan my murder, had tested poison on a family pet to make sure it would work on his own father. The house seemed to close in around me, every shadow, potentially hiding danger. I thought about Martha, about how she'd always seen the best in people, always believed in second chances. But even she had her limits. Even she knew when to protect yourself from those who meant you harm. I pulled out my phone and took photos of everything, the texts from Ethan, about the whiskey my call log, even the Christmas card that had come with the bottle. Then I called my lawyer, James Chen, leaving a message on his emergency line. Jim, it's Frank Dalton. I need to see you first thing after the holiday. It's urgent. It's about my will and some other matters. Call me when you get this. Then I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I went to the basement and opened the gun safe Martha had insisted I install when Ethan was born. Inside was my father's old .38 revolver, cleaned and oiled, unloaded. I took it out along with a box of ammunition and brought them upstairs. I wasn't a violent man. I'd never pointed this gun at another human being, but I was also not going to be a victim in my own home. The night deepened around me. I sat in Martha's chair with the revolver on my lap, watching the street through the window. Every car that passed made me tense, every sound made me alert. This was what my son had reduced me to, a frightened old man, with a gun waiting for an attack that could come at any moment. At midnight, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of it. The grief wasn't just for Martha anymore. It was for Ethan too, for the son I'd lost to greed and manipulation, for the family we'd been, for the future we'd never have. My boy was gone, replaced by someone who saw his father as an obstacle to be removed. I thought about all the Christmases past, all the moments of joy and love and simple happiness. And I thought about this Christmas, the loneliest and most terrifying of my life. The tears came then, hot and unexpected. I cried for Martha, for Ethan, for myself. I cried for the trust that had been shattered, for the love that had been perverted into hatred and greed. I cried until I had nothing left, until I was just an empty shell sitting in a dark house on Christmas night. But even as I cried, something else was building inside me. Not just grief, but anger. Not just fear, but determination. They thought I was a weak old man, easy to manipulate, easy to kill. They thought wrong. I dried my eyes and looked at Martha's photo on the mantel. In the dim light, her smile seemed different, not gentle and forgiving, but fierce and protective. The expression she'd worn when defending Ethan from bullies, when fighting the insurance company, when facing down her cancer with courage, I could only dream of having. "I'll fight," I whispered to her image. "Not for revenge, but for justice. For us. For what we built. They won't take it without a war." The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and groans. Outside, the last lights in the neighborhood windows went dark. Christmas was over, and the real battle was about to begin. I checked the locks one more time, loaded the revolver, and placed it in the nightstand drawer, and finally went to bed. Sleep came fitfully filled with dreams of Ethan as a child, laughing and innocent, mixed with nightmares of poison bottles and calculated smiles. Tomorrow, I would start planning. Tomorrow, I would become the kind of father who protects himself from his own son. Tomorrow, the war would truly begin. But tonight, I was just a man who'd lost everything that mattered, lying alone in a bed that had once held love and warmth and the promise of growing old together. The clock ticked toward tomorrow each second, a step closer to whatever truth the lab would reveal, whatever action I would have to take. And somewhere in California, my son slept peacefully, probably already counting the money he thought would soon be his. He didn't know his father yet, not the man I was about to become. The day after Christmas dawned gray and heavy with snow that hadn't yet fallen. I woke with a stiffness in my joints that had nothing to do with age, and everything to do with sleeping with one ear open, the weight of the revolver in my nightstand, a constant presence in my consciousness. The house felt different now. Every creak was a potential threat, every shadow a place someone could hide. I moved through my morning routine with heightened awareness, checking the locks I'd checked the night before, peering through windows before opening blinds, even examining my coffee pot before brewing. This was no way to live, but it was the only way to stay alive. At 8:30, my lawyer, Jim Chen, called back. His voice carried the slightly harried tone of a man interrupted during family time, but there was concern there too. "Frank, what's going on? Your message sounded urgent. Can you meet me today? I know it's the day after Christmas, but I'm at my sister's in Cleveland. I won't be back until the 29th. A pause. "Frank, you're scaring me. What's this about?" I looked out the kitchen window at the Henderson family building a snowman across the street, their laughter carrying on the cold air. Normal, safe. Everything my life wasn't anymore. I need to change my will, add some provisions, and I need to do it in a way that's ironclad, that can't be contested. Frank, wills can always be contested, you know that. But what's brought this on so suddenly? I chose my words carefully. Let's just say I've received some information that makes me want to ensure my assets go where I intend them to go, not where others might expect. Jim was quiet for a long moment. He'd handled Martha's estate, knew the tension between Ethan and me, had watched my son become increasingly distant and demanding over the years. "This is about Ethan, isn't it? I can't discuss it over the phone." "Jesus, Frank." I could hear him moving, probably stepping away from his family. "Okay, listen. I can squeeze you in on the 29th the first thing. 8:00 a.m. before my other appointments. But in the meantime, I want you to document everything. Every conversation, every concern, every incident. Dates, times, witnesses, if there are any. If this is going where I think it's going, you'll need evidence. I'm already working on it. And Frank, be careful. If you're changing beneficiaries, sometimes people get desperate when they find out." After we hung up, I sat at Martha's desk, the small secretary where she'd paid bills and written letters to distant relatives, and pulled out a leather-bound journal I'd given her years ago that she'd never used. The pages were blank waiting. I dated the first page December 26th and began to write. The bottle arrived December 23rd. Ethan called the same day, unusually insistent that I drink it. Called again Christmas Day with the same urgency. I filled 5 pages with everything I could remember, every detail that had seemed off, every conversation that had raised red flags. The cabin incident, the missing quilts, Madison's cold assessment of the house's value when she'd visited after Martha's funeral, Gerald's questions about my life insurance policy at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Patterns emerged on paper that I dismissed in the moment. A careful, methodical campaign to isolate me, inventory my assets, and position themselves as my caretakers and eventual heirs. At noon, Sophia called from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Dalton, I got a burner phone. I can't risk them seeing me calling you." Her voice was low, urgent. "They're planning to visit you next week. Ethan told my parents he's concerned about your state of mind, that you've been acting erratically since Mom died." My blood ran cold. State of mind? It's their backup plan. If the whiskey didn't work, they're going to try to have you declared incompetent. Get conservatorship. Madison already has a psychiatrist lined up who will testify you're not capable of managing your affairs. The room spun slightly. It was brilliant in a terrible way. An old widower living alone, refusing to sell property, making irrational decisions. It would be easy to paint me as someone in decline. Do you have proof of this? Some. They were texting about it yesterday. I took photos of Madison's phone when she left it on the kitchen counter. A pause. I'm sending them to you now. But, Mr. Dalton, you need to be proactive. Get your own psychiatric evaluation, have your doctor document your mental competency. Do it before they make their move. The photos came through screenshots of a group text between Ethan, Madison, Gerald, and Patricia. My hands shook as I read them. Gerald, the old fool still hasn't drunk it. We need Plan B ready. Madison Dr. Rashford said he can schedule an evaluation within 48 hours of our request. Said cases like this are sadly common with elderly widowers. Ethan, we need to establish a pattern of erratic behavior first. Dad's already refusing to sell the cabin, that's a start. We need more examples of poor judgment. Patricia, what about finances? Has he been making questionable purchases, Ethan? Not that I can see, but we could suggest he's being scammed, that someone's taking advantage of him. Gerald, perfect. Elderly financial abuse. Another mark in our column. I had to sit down, my legs suddenly weak. These were messages from my son, my daughter-in-law, her parents, plotting my destruction with the casual efficiency of a business transaction. I forwarded everything to my own email, created backups, saved the images to a cloud drive. Then I called my doctor's office. Dr. Morrison's office, this is Janine. Janine, this is Frank Dalton. I need to see the doctor urgently. It's not a medical emergency, but it's important. Mr. Dalton, the doctor, won't be back until January 2nd. Can this wait? No, it really can't. I took a breath. I need a complete physical and mental competency evaluation. There's been some suggestion that that my judgment might be impaired. I need documentation that I'm sound of mind. Janine's voice shifted, becoming more alert. Mr. Dalton is someone trying to have you declared incompetent. I have reason to believe they're planning to. Oh my God. Okay, let me call the doctor. He's at home, but this is important. Can you come in tomorrow at 10 a.m.? We can do an emergency evaluation. Yes, thank you, Janine. Mr. Dalton, bring any documentation you have, the texts, any threats, any evidence that this is being done in bad faith. The doctor will want to note it in your file. After arranging the appointment, I spent the afternoon fortifying my defenses. I called the bank and added additional security questions to my accounts, requested that any large withdrawals require in-person verification with photo ID. I changed the passwords on all my online accounts, enabled two-factor authentication, and set up alerts for any unusual activity. Then I did something that felt both paranoid and necessary. I installed a security camera system, the kind you could buy at the hardware store, and set up yourself with cameras that would record to the cloud. I mounted one over the front door, one watching the driveway, one in the kitchen, and one in the living room. Robert stopped by as I was finishing ostensibly to drop off leftover Christmas cookies from his daughter, but really to check on me. Cameras, Frank. He looked at the setup with concern. I need evidence if they try anything, and I need proof of my competency that I'm taking rational, appropriate steps to protect myself. He nodded slowly. Mike called. He's running the test tonight. Promised to have preliminary results by morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed watching the camera feeds on my phone, seeing my empty living room from 4 different angles. At 2:00 a.m., a car drove slowly past my house, pausing for just a moment before continuing. I couldn't see the license plate, couldn't identify the make, but my heart raced for an hour afterward. At 7:00 a.m., my phone rang. Robert. Frank, Mike just called. You need to sit down for this. I was already sitting at the kitchen table, coffee untouched in front of me. Tell me. The whiskey. Jesus, Frank. It's laced with white snake root extract, highly concentrated. Mike said a single shot would have been enough to cause fatal cardiac arrhythmia in someone with your medical history. Would have looked exactly like a heart attack. The room went silent, except for the ticking of the kitchen clock each second a moment I wouldn't have had if I'd drunk that whiskey. Mike's documenting everything, writing up a formal report. Says this is attempted murder, no question. He's legally obligated to report it to the police. Not yet, I said quickly. I need more evidence first. I need to show pattern, intent, conspiracy. One bottle could be explained away, someone else having access to it, contamination and accident. I need more. Frank, they tried to kill you. And they'll try again if we tip our hand too soon. Robert, trust me. I know what I'm doing. After we hung up, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. The man looking back at me was someone I barely recognized, harder, older, with eyes that had seen too much. But he was alive, and he was going to stay that way. At 10:00 a.m., I sat in Dr. Morrison's office undergoing the most thorough examination I'd had in years. Physical tests, cognitive assessments, memory games, psychological evaluations. Dr. Morrison, a man who'd been my physician for 20 years, worked with quiet efficiency. "Frank," he said when we finished, "I'm writing in your file that you are of completely sound mind and body. Your cognitive function is excellent for your age, better than most men 20 years younger. Your decision-making capacity is unimpaired. You're taking appropriate rational steps to protect yourself from what appears to be a genuine threat. Can you make that ironclad legal document quality? I'll write a formal letter to accompany your medical records. If anyone tries to question your competency, I'll testify that this evaluation shows clear, rational thinking and appropriate concern for your safety." He paused. "Frank, what's going on? This is your son we're talking about, isn't it? I can't discuss details, not yet. But yes." Dr. Morrison shook his head sadly. "I've seen this before. Adult children who see their parents as obstacles to inheritance. Usually it's just emotional abuse, financial manipulation. But this," he looked at his notes. "Frank, you need to go to the police." "I will, when I have enough to make charges stick." The next day, December 28th, I made another important call to Martha's brother Tom, who lived in Oregon. We'd grown apart after Martha's death, the grief creating distance where there had once been closeness. "Tom, it's Frank." "Frank, good to hear from you. How was Christmas?" "Complicated. Tom, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Has Ethan contacted you recently?" A pause. "Yes, actually. Called about a week ago. Said he was concerned about you, that you'd been acting strangely since Martha passed. Asked if I'd noticed any signs of confusion or poor judgment." My jaw clenched. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you seemed fine to me, though we hadn't talked much." "Why? What's going on?" "Tom, I need you to document that conversation. Date, time, what he said, what you said. Email it to me." "Frank, you're scaring me. What's Ethan done?" I told him some of it, not the poisoned whiskey, but the manipulation, the plans for conservatorship, the way they'd been systematically working to paint me as incompetent. Jesus Christ, that son of a bitch. Tom's voice was tight with anger. "Martha's boy, our Martha's son is doing this to you, not her son anymore, someone else's. What do you need from me? Be a witness, document everything. If Ethan contacts you again, record it if you can. Oregon is a one-party consent state for recordings." "Done. Frank, is there anything else? Do you need money, a place to stay?" "Not yet. But Tom, if something happens to me, anything, I need you to ask questions. Don't accept easy answers. Promise me. Nothing's going to happen to you. We won't let it." After we hung up, I added Tom's information to my growing file of evidence. Each piece was a brick in a wall I was building, not to hide behind, but to trap those who'd tried to destroy me. That afternoon, I visited the police station, not to file a report yet, but to speak with Officer Jennifer Alvarez, a community liaison I'd known for years through neighborhood watch meetings. "Mr. Dalton, what can I do for you? I need advice off the record. If someone attempted to poison another person but the victim didn't consume the poison, what kind of evidence would be needed to prosecute?" Her expression shifted immediately to professional concern. "Are you in danger, Mr. Dalton?" "Potentially, but I need to understand the legal framework before I make any official statements." She studied me for a long moment. "You'd need proof of intent evidence that the person knowingly introduced the poison with intent to harm or kill. You'd need chain of custody documentation for the poison substance. You'd need to establish opportunity and motive. And ideally, you'd need communication showing planning or acknowledgement of the act. What if that person was a family member, a son, for instance? Then you'd likely also face questions about inheritance, financial gain, any recent changes to wills or insurance policies." She leaned forward. "Mr. Dalton, this is serious. If you have evidence of attempted murder, we need to know. Now. Soon, I promised. I'm gathering everything I need, But, Officer Alvarez, if I come in to make a formal complaint in the next few days, I'll need protection. These people have resources connections. They won't go quietly. Come in any time, day or night. Ask for me specifically. We'll take care of you. Walking out of the police station, I felt both relieved and terrified. The net was closing, but I was still exposed, still vulnerable. One more piece. I needed one more definitive piece of evidence. That night, I reviewed everything I'd gathered the poisoned whiskey with lab documentation, the text messages from Sophia showing premeditation, Tom's testimony about Ethan's attempts to establish incompetency, Dr. Morrison's evaluation, proving my soundness of mind, the documented phone calls, the security footage. It was almost enough. But I needed them to make one more move, one final mistake that would seal their fate completely. As if reading my mind, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Dad, we need to talk. Important family business. Madison and I are driving up tomorrow. Be there around 2:00 p.m. Don't make plans." Not a request, a command. They were coming probably with papers to sign with their psychiatrist on speed dial, ready to spring their trap. But I had a trap of my own waiting. I replied, "I'll be here." Then I made 3 calls to Robert, to Officer Alvarez, and to a locksmith. Tomorrow they would come to my house, expecting a confused old man, easy to manipulate, easy to control. Instead, they would find a father who'd learned that sometimes love requires letting go, and justice requires standing firm. I checked the cameras one more time, verified the recordings were backing up to the cloud, and made sure my phone was fully charged. Tomorrow would be the beginning of the end. One way or another, this would be finished. I just had to survive until then. The morning of December 29th arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of cold, bright winter day where everything stands out in sharp relief. I woke at dawn having slept fitfully despite the exhaustion. My dreams had been full of Ethan as a child, laughing as I pushed him on the swing set I'd built in the backyard, his small hand in mine, as we walked to his first day of school. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life now. I spent the morning preparing, not just emotionally, but practically. I called Officer Alvarez at 8:00 a.m. "They're coming at 2:00 p.m., I told her. "I need you standing by. We'll have a unit 2 blocks away ready to move on your signal. Do you have the recording equipment set up? Every room is covered. Audio and video all backing up to cloud storage in real time. Frank, be careful. If they suspect, this could get dangerous." I'm counting on them not suspecting anything until it's too late. Robert arrived at 9:00 a.m. with Mike's official lab report, 10 pages of technical analysis that boiled down to one damning conclusion. The whiskey contained enough white snake root extract to kill a healthy man, let alone someone with my cardiac history. The report was signed, dated, and notarized. Mike said he's never seen anything this deliberate. Robert said, his face grave. This wasn't contamination or accident. Someone extracted the poison, concentrated it, and added it to expensive whiskey to mask the bitter taste. Someone being my son and his wife. Robert gripped my shoulder. "I've got your back today, Frank. You need me to stay, I stay. No, this needs to be just family, but keep your phone close." After Robert left, I arranged the living room carefully. The cameras were hidden in plain sight, one in a bookshelf, one in the old clock on the mantel, one in the smoke detector. The audio recorder sat disguised as a charging station on the side table. Everything was positioned to capture every angle, every word. At 11:00 a.m., Jim Chen arrived early, having driven straight through from Cleveland overnight, when I'd called him with the full story. "Jesus Christ, Frank," he said, scanning the lab report. "This is attempted murder. I know. That's why I need the new will ironclad before they get here." We spent the next 2 hours at my dining room table, drafting a new will that left everything to charity. The house to a veterans organization, my savings to the local children's hospital, the cabin to a conservation trust. Ethan would receive exactly $1 and a letter explaining why. "If they're here to pressure you about inheritance, this will tell you everything you need to know about their true intentions," Jim said as I signed the final page. "That's exactly what I'm counting on." Jim left at 1:30, taking the executed will with him for safekeeping, leaving me alone in the quiet house. I sat in Martha's chair by the window, watching the street, my phone in one hand, with Officer Alvarez's number ready to dial. At 1:55, the black SUV pulled up. Ethan and Madison emerged first, both dressed like they were attending a business meeting, him in a dark suit, her in a tailored dress and heels, completely inappropriate for the snowy weather. Then the back doors opened, and Gerald and Patricia stepped out, followed by a man I didn't recognize, late 50s, silver hair carrying a leather briefcase. My stomach tightened. The psychiatrist. They'd brought their whole team. I took a deep breath and opened the door before they could knock. "Dad." Ethan's smile was practiced concerned. "Thanks for seeing us on such short notice. You said it was important family business." "It is." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the others following. "This is Dr. Rashford. He's a psychiatrist we've consulted about your situation." I worried the trap was springing, but not the way they thought. "My situation?" I kept my voice calm, controlled. Madison moved to stand beside Ethan, a united front. "Richard, we're worried about you. Living alone in this big house, making questionable decisions, refusing to see reason about the cabin. The cabin that you and your parents tried to steal." Her face flushed. "That's exactly the kind of paranoid thinking we're talking about. Dr. Rashford, you can see what we're dealing with." The psychiatrist, if that's what he really was, opened his briefcase. "Mr. Dalton, I'd like to ask you a few questions if I may. Standard cognitive assessment." "Do you have a warrant for that assessment?" "Doctor," he blinked surprised. "This is voluntary for your own benefit." "Then I decline." Ethan stepped forward. "Dad, don't be difficult. We're trying to help you." "Help me how?" "By having me declared incompetent, by taking control of my assets, by making sure I'm not around to interfere with your plans." The room went very quiet. Gerald and Patricia exchanged glances. Madison's expression hardened. "What are you talking about?" Ethan's voice carried a warning edge. I walked to the kitchen and returned with the bottle of whiskey, still in its original packaging, sealed in a clear evidence bag. "This. Your Christmas gift." Ethan's face went pale. I sent that for you to enjoy." "Did you? Or did you send it hoping I'd be dead by New Year's?" "That's insane!" Madison's voice was shrill. "Richard, this is exactly why we're concerned. You're making wild accusations." I pulled out my phone and began reading from the lab report. "White snake root extract, highly concentrated, sufficient dosage to cause fatal cardiac arrhythmia in an individual with pre-existing heart conditions. Professionally extracted and blended to mask the bitter taste." The color drained from every face in the room. "You tested it," Ethan whispered. "Of course I tested it. Did you really think I'd forgotten my heart condition? Or did you count on me forgetting the way you've tried to paint me as forgetful and confused?" Gerald found his voice first. "This is preposterous. Anyone could have tampered with that bottle. The shipping company, a disgruntled employee. Except I have text messages." I pulled out my phone and began reading. "The old fool still hasn't drunk it. We need Plan B ready." I looked at Gerald. "That's you from December 25th, to your daughter, my son, and your wife. Should I continue?" Patricia grabbed Gerald's arm. "We should go, now." "Yes, you should," I said. "But first I want Ethan to know something." I looked at my son, saw the fear and calculation in his eyes. "I changed my will this morning. Everything, the house, the cabin, my savings, it all goes to charity. You get $1 and a letter explaining why your mother would be ashamed of what you've become." "You can't do that," Madison shrieked. "That's our inheritance." "Your inheritance." I laughed a bitter sound. "You tried to murder me for an inheritance that no longer exists. How does that feel? Ethan, you sold your soul for nothing." Ethan's face twisted with rage. "You think you're so clever? You think this is over? We'll fight this. We'll prove you're incompetent, that you were manipulated." "By whom?" "The multiple witnesses who will testify to my sound mind. The doctor who evaluated me yesterday and found me perfectly competent. The lawyer who helped me execute a valid will this morning. Or maybe you mean Officer Alvarez, who's been on standby waiting for my call." I held up my phone finger, hovering over the dial button. Dr. Rashford was already backing toward the door. "I don't know what this is about, but I'm not part of it. I was told this was a standard competency evaluation." "Of course you were," I said. "That's how they operate. Using people, manipulating situations, always staying just clean enough to avoid direct responsibility." I looked at Ethan again. "But not this time. This time every word you've spoken has been recorded. Every threat, every admission, audio and video, all backed up to the cloud." Ethan's eyes darted around the room, searching for cameras. "You were recording us. Patricia's voice was faint. In my own home? Absolutely. Perfectly legal in this state. Would you like to continue talking, or should I call the police now? Gerald grabbed Patricia's arm. We're leaving. We had nothing to do with any of this. Ethan handled the Christmas gift on his own. Don't you dare, Ethan snarled at his father-in-law. Don't you dare try to pin this all on me. You were the one who suggested it, who knew someone who could get the extract. Shut up, Madison grabbed Ethan's arm. Stop talking. But Ethan was past reason, past calculation. The mask had finally slipped completely. He was supposed to drink at Christmas Day. You said it would be quick, painless look, just like his heart finally giving out. We'd be sympathetic, grieving family, and no one would question anything. Ethan, please. Madison's voice broke. Why should I be quiet? He's already got everything. The recording, the lab report were finished anyway. He turned back to me, and for a moment I saw naked hatred in his eyes. You were supposed to die, old man. You were supposed to drink that whiskey and drop dead, so we could finally live our lives without you hanging around like a ghost, constantly reminding everyone of your perfect little marriage, your perfect little life, my perfect life. I stared at him. The life where I worked 60-hour weeks to give you opportunities I never had, where your mother and I saved for years so you could go to college, where we mortgaged this house to help with your down payment, and you never let us forget it. Every conversation, every holiday, we worked so hard. We sacrificed so much. Well, I'm tired of being your charity case. I'm tired of being compared to your perfect life with perfect Martha. The room went absolutely silent. Even Madison looked shocked at the venom in his voice. So, this is what it's about, I said softly. Not just money. You resented us. Resented your own mother. She made everything about sacrifice and duty and doing the right thing, just like you. Nothing was ever good enough, was it? Madison's family showed me what life could be like with money, with status, with things that matter. Things that matter, I repeated, like poisoning your father. Ethan's laugh was wild, unhinged. You're so righteous, aren't you? So perfect. Well, you know what? I'm glad I did it. I'm only sorry it didn't work. Madison was crying now, mascara running down her face. Gerald and Patricia looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Dr. Rashford had already fled to his car. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Officer Alvarez. They've confessed. Everything. You can come now. Ethan lunged at me, but Gerald grabbed him back. Don't make it worse, boy. Worse. Ethan laughed again, that terrible broken sound. How could it be worse? He's won. He's always won. Perfect Frank and his perfect dead wife and their disappointing son who never measured up. Through the window, I could see the police cars approaching, lights flashing, but sirens silent. For what it's worth, Ethan, I said quietly, you were never disappointing, not until you chose to be. The police were at the door now. Officer Alvarez entered first, 2 uniformed officers behind her. Mr. Dalton, are you all right? I'm fine. These people attempted to murder me. I have physical evidence, recorded confessions, and multiple witnesses. They came here today to have me declared incompetent and take control of my assets. Madison collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Gerald and Patricia stood, frozen faces ashen. Ethan just stared at me with empty eyes. Ethan Dalton, Madison Dalton, Gerald Monroe, Patricia Monroe. Officer Alvarez began, You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. The Miranda rights faded into background noise as I watched them being handcuffed, my son, his wife, her parents, the family that had tried to destroy me. Ethan looked at me one last time as they let him out. I hate you, he said simply. I know, I replied, but I loved you. That's the difference between us. After they were gone, after the police had collected the evidence and taken my statement, after Officer Alvarez had assured me they wouldn't make bail, I was finally alone. The house was quiet. The cameras were still recording, but there was nothing left to capture except an old man standing in his living room, surrounded by the wreckage of his family. I walked to the mantel and picked up the photo of Ethan at 7, gap-toothed and happy. That boy was gone, had been gone for years. I'd just been too stubborn to admit it. I set the photo face down and picked up the one of Martha instead. Her smile, captured in silver frame and fading color, was the only constant in my life anymore. It's done, I told her. They can't hurt us anymore. Outside, the winter sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and trials and the slow machinery of justice. But tonight, I was alive, safe, free. And that would have to be enough. The house felt different after they took Ethan away. Not quieter it had been quiet before, but emptied of something I couldn't quite name. The potential for reconciliation, maybe. The last fragile thread of hope that somehow someday we might find our way back to each other. That thread had been cut, and I was the one who'd held the scissors. I spent that first night sitting in Martha's chair, watching the recordings play back on my phone. Ethan's face twisted with rage, Madison's tears, Gerald's calculating attempts to shift blame, Patricia's horror at being caught. I watched them over and over, looking for something, remorse perhaps, or genuine love buried beneath the greed and manipulation. I found nothing. At midnight, Tom called from Oregon. "Frank, I just saw the news. My God, what they tried to do. It's over now. Over, Frank, this is just beginning. The trial, the media. Attention having to testify against your own son. I know." I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. "But he's alive, Tom. That's more mercy than he showed me. Martha would be—" He stopped, unable to finish. "Heartbroken, I know, but she'd also understand. She always knew when to protect yourself, even from people you love." We talked for another hour, Tom sharing memories of Martha, of Christmases past, when Ethan was still the nephew he recognized. When we finally hung up, the first light of dawn was creeping through the windows. I made coffee, that ritual that anchored my days, and sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper. On page 3 there it was, "Local man arrested in alleged murder plot against father." They'd used Ethan's booking photo, his face a mask of defiance and fear. The doorbell rang at 8:00 a.m. I checked the camera feed, first a habit now, and saw Robert standing on my porch with a covered dish. "Thought you might not feel like cooking," he said when I opened the door. Carol made her breakfast casserole. We sat at the kitchen table, and for the first time in days, I felt hungry. The casserole was warm, rich with cheese and sausage, the kind of comfort food Martha used to make. "How are you holding up?" Robert asked. "I'm alive. That's more than I would be if Ethan had his way." "The whole town's talking. Henderson's Hardware had it on the radio this morning. Local contractor's son arrested for attempted poisoning." Robert shook his head. "Never thought I'd hear those words about Ethan." "Neither did I. What happens now?" I pulled out the papers Jim Chen had left with me. "The prosecutor called this morning. With the evidence we have, the lab report, the recordings, their confession, they're offering a plea deal. 20 years for Ethan and Madison, 10 for Gerald and Patricia if they testify against the others. Will they take it? Gerald's lawyer already called. He's willing to testify. Says Ethan approached him with a plan that he and Patricia were reluctant participants." Robert snorted. "Reluctant my ass. Those text messages say different." "I know, but if they all go to trial, there's a chance they could walk. Better to take the guaranteed conviction." 20 years. Robert was quiet for a moment. "Ethan will be almost 60 when he gets out." If he gets out, I thought, but didn't say. Prison was hard on men who'd never known real hardship. Ethan, with his soft hands and expensive suits, would either adapt or break. Either way, the son I'd known was already gone. The following days brought a parade of visitors. Jim Chen handling the legal paperwork. Officer Alvarez updating me on the case. Sophia Madison's sister, who came to apologize for her family. "I should have warned you sooner," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I knew they were planning something, but I didn't want to believe they'd actually try to kill you. You warned me in time. That's what matters." "My whole family is poison," she said. "I'm changing my name, moving away. I can't be associated with them anymore." I gave her a letter of recommendation for what I wasn't sure, but she'd need help starting over. She was the only decent one among them, and that decency had come at a terrible price. The media attention was worse than I'd expected. Reporters camped outside my house, shouting questions whenever I stepped onto the porch. The story had everything they loved: family betrayal, poison, greed, a Christmas murder plot. I became the grandfather who refused to die, a soundbite that made me feel like a circus attraction. After 3 days of harassment, I called Tom. "Can I come stay with you for a while, just until the trial is over?" "Pack your bags. I'm booking you a flight tonight." Oregon in January was wet and gray, but Tom's house was warm and welcoming. His wife Sarah fussed over me like I was one of her own children, making sure I ate, that I slept, that I wasn't dwelling too much on what had happened. But dwelling was inevitable. In the quiet moments, I found myself thinking about Ethan, not the man who'd tried to kill me, but the boy he'd been. The toddler who'd called me Dada with such joy. The 7-year-old who'd cried when his hamster died, who'd wanted to bury it in the backyard with a proper funeral. The teenager who'd stayed up all night helping me finish a project for a client, determined to prove he could handle responsibility. Where had that boy gone? Had he ever really existed? Or had I just seen what I wanted to see? A son who shared my values, my work ethic, my integrity. "You're torturing yourself," Sarah said one evening, finding me on their back deck staring at the rain. "I keep wondering what I did wrong, where I failed him." "Frank, you didn't fail him. He made his choices. Terrible, evil choices, but his choices nonetheless." "But why was I too hard on him, too demanding?" Sarah sat beside me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "Tom told me what Ethan said about resenting you and Martha, feeling like he never measured up. Sometimes children create their own narrative twist. Love into obligation, turn sacrifice into guilt. You gave him everything, and he chose to see it as a burden. I should have seen the signs earlier. Maybe. But, Frank, at some point, we have to let adults be responsible for their own actions. Ethan didn't just make one mistake he planned, he calculated, he recruited others. That's not a cry for help. That's malice." The trial was set for March. I flew back in February to meet with the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Reeves, who reminded me of Martha in her no-nonsense efficiency. "They're all taking the plea," she said, sliding the paperwork across her desk. "Ethan gets 25 years, Madison 20, Gerald and Patricia 10 each. With good behavior, Ethan might be out in 18 to 20. And the money they thought they'd get, every penny spent on their defense plus restitution to you for emotional damages, they'll leave prison with nothing." There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory, just a hollow acknowledgement that justice, such as it was, would be served. The sentencing hearing was on March 15th, the Ides of March. The courthouse was packed, reporters, curious townspeople, a few of Ethan's old friends who couldn't believe what he'd become. I sat in the front row as they brought him in. He'd lost weight in jail, his expensive suits replaced by orange scrubs, his groomed appearance gone ragged. His eyes found mine, and for a moment I saw something flicker there, regret maybe, or just the recognition of consequences. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Ethan stood. "I'm sorry," he said, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor, the walls, anywhere but at the father he'd tried to murder. "I made mistakes. I let other people influence me. I wasn't thinking clearly." Not an apology, an excuse. Even now, even facing 25 years in prison, he couldn't take responsibility for his actions. The judge wasn't impressed. "Mr. Dalton, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to poison your father. You chose to recruit your wife and her parents in this scheme. You chose greed over love, money over family. These aren't the choices of someone who wasn't thinking clearly. These are the calculated decisions of someone who valued inheritance over human life." She sentenced him to the maximum 25 years without the possibility of parole for 15. Madison got 20. Gerald and Patricia got 12 each for their cooperation. As they led Ethan away, he looked at me one final time. "I hope you enjoy that house," he said, venom in his voice. "I hope every room reminds you that your son is rotting in prison because of you." "No, Ethan," I said quietly. "You're in prison because of you." After the sentencing, I stood on the courthouse steps facing the cameras I'd been avoiding for months. "I have a statement," I said, and the crowd went silent. "My son tried to kill me because he saw me as an obstacle to wealth he believed was his birthright. But he forgot something important. You can't inherit what was built on love if you don't understand what love means. This house he coveted, this money he wanted, it was never just property and assets. It was 42 years of marriage, of sacrifice, of building something together. He wanted the result without understanding the foundation." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "I don't forgive him. I can't. But I also don't hate him. Hate requires energy I no longer have to spend. He made his choices, and now he'll live with the consequences. I hope in time he finds whatever peace is available to someone who tried to murder their own father. As for me, I'm going home. To the house I built with my wife, filled with memories of a life lived with integrity and love. That's something no amount of money can buy and something he'll never understand. The reporters shouted questions, but I was done. Robert was waiting with his truck and we drove away in silence. The house was exactly as I'd left it, yet completely different. The cameras were still there, the security system active, but the threat was gone. I was safe. That night, I sat in Martha's chair with a cup of tea. I still couldn't bring myself to drink whiskey, might never again, and allowed myself to feel everything I'd been holding back. Grief for the son I'd lost, relief that the danger had passed, exhaustion from months of fear and vigilance. The tears came quietly without drama, just the slow leak of pain too long contained. I cried for Martha, who'd never have to know what our son had become. I cried for the grandchildren I'd never have for Christmas mornings that would forever be marked by this betrayal. I cried for myself, for the trust that had been shattered, for the family that had died, not with a death, but with deliberate murder of everything we'd built. When the tears finally stopped, I was empty, but somehow lighter. The worst had happened, I'd survived, and now I could begin the work of figuring out how to live with what remained. I stood and walked through the house room by room, reclaiming it. This was mine not through inheritance or theft, but through 42 years of love and labor. Every nail I'd driven, every board I'd sanded, every wall I'd painted, held a memory that was precious and real. In the bedroom, I opened Martha's jewelry box and pulled out her wedding ring, the simple gold band she'd worn for 4 decades. I held it up to the light, seeing the tiny scratches and dents that marked a life lived fully. "We did it right," I told her, picture on the nightstand. Whatever Ethan became, we did our part right. We loved him, raised him, gave him every opportunity. His choices are his own. The ring caught the lamplight, throwing tiny golden sparks across the ceiling. I put it back carefully, closing the box with a soft click. Tomorrow, I'd start making plans, maybe volunteer at the VA hospital, finally take that woodworking class at the community center, perhaps even travel. The money Ethan had wanted so badly would go to good causes, would help people who understood that value wasn't measured in dollars, but in how you lived your life. But tonight I was just a man who'd survived standing in a house built on love, surrounded by memories that poison couldn't touch and greed couldn't diminish. I was alone, yes, but I was alive, I was free, and I was home. And somehow, that was enough. Spring came to the house on Maple Street with the gentle insistence of life reasserting itself. The snow melted, revealing Martha's garden beds beneath. And I found myself on my knees in the dirt for the first time in 3 years, pulling weeds and preparing the soil for planting. The neighbors had been kind in their way. Mrs. Henderson brought casseroles at first, then just quiet waves from across the street. The initial curiosity about the man whose son tried to poison him had faded into something softer, respect perhaps, or simply the understanding that some stories don't need retelling. I planted Martha's favorite roses, the yellow ones that bloom twice a season if you cared for them properly. My hands remembered the work even if my back complained. Dirt under my fingernails, the smell of earth warming in the sun. It felt like coming home to myself. Robert stopped by one Saturday morning in May, finding me pruning the lilac bush by the front porch. "Looking good, Frank," he said, and I knew he meant more than the garden. "It's time," I said simply. "Past time, maybe." We sat on the porch with glasses of lemonade watching the Henderson kids play basketball in their driveway. Normal life continuing around me. "Tom called," Robert said. "Said you've been talking about selling the cabin." I nodded. "Too many memories there, and not all of them good anymore. There's a conservation group interested. They'll keep it undeveloped, use it for educational programs. Martha would have liked that. And the house. I looked back through the screen door at the living room, the mantel with Martha's photo, the chair where I'd spent so many evenings. This stays. This is home. The money from the cabin sale went to the Children's Hospital, funding a new cardiac wing. They wanted to name it after me, but I insisted on Martha's name instead. The Martha Dalton Cardiac Care Center opened in September, and I attended the ribbon cutting in my best suit, the one I'd worn to her funeral. "She would have loved this," Tom said, standing beside me as doctors and nurses filed past with their gratitude. "She would have told them to stop fussing and get back to work," I replied, and we both smiled because it was true. Ethan wrote me a letter in October, It sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it. Dad, it began, and I almost stopped reading there. He'd lost the right to call me that. The prison counselor says I should try to make amends. I don't know if that's possible, but I want you to know that I understand now what I threw away. Not the money, I understand, that was never mine, but the chance to be your son, to have the relationship we once had. I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I forgot to value what I already had. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry, not for getting caught, but for becoming someone who would do what I did. I hope you're well, I hope you're happy. I hope somehow you can remember the boy I was before I became the man who hurt you. Ethan. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in the drawer with Martha's letters, the ones she'd written me when we were first courting. Not because I forgave him, I wasn't sure I ever could, but because it was part of the story, and stories deserve their endings. I didn't write back. Christmas came again, and this time I put up a tree, a small one, just for me, with ornaments Martha had collected, and a few new ones I'd bought at the church bazaar. I strung lights that cast gentle shadows across the living room, and on Christmas Eve I sat in Martha's chair with hot chocolate and watched It's a Wonderful Life alone, but not lonely, never lonely anymore. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar and safe. Through the window I could see the Henderson family gathering for their celebration, could hear their laughter carrying on the cold air. Once that might have made the emptiness sharper. Now it just was life continuing, different but not less. I raised my mug to Martha's photo, to the memories we'd made in this house, to the 42 years of love that no amount of betrayal could erase. "Merry Christmas, my love," I whispered. The tree lights twinkled in response, red and green and gold, casting their gentle glow across a room that had known both profound joy and terrible sorrow, but remained fundamentally a home. Outside, snow began to fall, soft flakes drifting past the window like whispered blessings. The garage where I had taught Ethan to use tools sat dark and quiet. The kitchen where Martha had baked countless Christmas cookies waited for morning light. The bedroom where we'd shared dreams and built our life together would welcome me soon enough. This house, this home, this life, they were mine. Earned through love and labor, protected through courage and conviction, lived in with dignity and peace. Ethan was gone, would be gone for years to come. But Martha's love remained in every board and beam, every carefully chosen paint color, every memory held within these walls. And I remained too alive, safe, and finally, mercifully at peace. The snow fell heavier now, blanketing the world in white silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to fill the days. But tonight, Christmas Eve in the house on Maple Street, I was simply a man who had survived, who had fought for what mattered, and who had learned that sometimes the greatest victory is simply the freedom to live your life on your own terms. I finished my hot chocolate, turned off the tree lights, and headed to bed. The house settled into darkness around me, holding its secrets and its stories. A sanctuary built on love that would stand long after I was gone. Home. Finally, truly home. If you find the story interesting, comment number 1. If you find it sad, comment number 2.